Okay, so It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. That's what this is about. So I just finished it. It was an audiobook. I put this in the genres adult, contemporary romance fiction, open door, and insta love. I gave it 2 stars. I have read one other Tessa Bailey book, which was Fixer Up, like 2 years ago, and I gave it 1 star, I think. I read the review that I wrote, and I couldn't really remember the book that much. I didn't like it, I knew that, and I remember that I didn't like it. So this was kind of my second chance for Tessa Bailey, but I didn't remember the story that much, so I had to read a lot of reviews to remember what even happened. And that was why when I read this book, I finished it, and I was like, I don't have that many thoughts about it, so I don't even know if I'm going to write a review or anything. That's the problem, though, because I'm going to forget everything about the book. So I actually have been thinking about it since then, reading reviews and just kind of just going over my thoughts, I guess, on it since I finished it yesterday, and I actually do have a lot of things to say. So let's start out with the plot. Spoiled rich girl. I'm just reading what I wrote down a second ago, so it doesn't go on for like 10 minutes. Spoiled rich girl and influencer Piper breaks the law. She had a party in a pool that was closed, and her stepfather sends her to a town that her father is from and where he owned a bar. Her father died when she was really young, but he was a fisherman at this tiny fishing town in Washington, I think. He sends her there for 3 months to learn the value of money and hard work. She meets Brendan, who's a fishing boat captain, and who at first thinks she's very shallow, but ends up very quickly falling for her. Piper has a pretty quick personality turnaround and takes to fixing up the bar so she can show her stepfather what she's done and hopefully get out of the town sooner than 3 months. She essentially starts dating Brendan, but invites her stepfather for the grand opening of the bar, and also her friends in LA are going to throw her the Party Queen returns party once she gets home. She doesn't tell Brendan about either of those things, and he finds out and gets very upset with her, and she gets upset, and then he leaves on a boat for a few days, and then her stepdad cancels, and then she thinks the opening is a flop because no one shows up on time. So she goes to LA for the party, and Brendan comes home and hears that she's gone. So he goes to find her at the party, and he's like, this isn't the life. And she's like, this isn't the life for me anymore, get me out. And he does, and that's the end. So my quick little review of it is I didn't like it much. I was fine with both of the characters and mostly fine with the story. It was a fun read, but it was a fun reading experience, but overall afterward there were things that I thought about and took issue with. The tropes it included were mostly tropes that I like, kind of beside insta-love. The enemies to lover's attempt was weak and short-lived, so I would not call it that. Like I said, he didn't like her when he first saw her because she was like a spoiled brat. But then not much later he's like, there was an instant pull, blah, blah, blah. I loved her since the moment it was like, okay. So here's some of my issues and points. Number 1, the title. It Happened One Summer. There was not much indication that this even was summer, except that near the end of the book, they were talking about Labor Day, and it was almost Labor Day. It's in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, the ocean is there. This is not like a beach read. This is not anything like that. It's like, cozy up with a sweater read. And yet it was summer. I mean, it's north, so whatever, but there was no summariness about it at all. And the title otherwise had nothing, it didn't mean anything. Number 2, Piper's personality turnaround. It was very quick and it didn't make much sense. She did have a budget from her stepdad, but beside that, it was really yeah, okay, I can believe that she's always been a generous, nice person. But her being like, oh, my lifestyle was so shallow and vapid and, I don't want anything to do with that anymore, was okay, I guess. But I mean, she grew up like a millionaire with her millionaire stepdad. So it doesn't really make sense that she would love to live in a 1-bedroom apartment where she cooks all her meals and blah, blah, blah. I can understand her thinking that her lifestyle of partying was kind of over the top and like not something she wants to do anymore, but not necessarily the lifestyle of like a rich person. I think it would take a lot longer to just like get over that. Brendan kind of pretends, yeah, like I said, Brendan kind of pretends like he doesn't like her when he first sees her, but you find out like very soon after that he thought she was pretty and also was super attracted to her. It was kind of like, I mean, you know, she's hot, and he liked her, that she was hot. There wasn't much more to it than that. I liked the attempt at their acceptance of her being both people. Like he asked, like, which are you? The person whose dad is from this fisherman town and is like cool with being in a fisherman's town, or are you LA party queen? And she was like, I'm both. And I was like, yeah, she is. That's fine. But that was kind of the only thing they said about that. And then in the end, they kind of ruined that with the way the plot went. I would have preferred if the ending was a little bit more of a compromise rather than her, like, she like had this panic attack at the party and was like, she saw Brendan, she was like, get me out of here. Back to the Fisher town where she was like, it was very much like LA or Westport. And it's like, okay, you don't have to choose. Like, you can do both. She could still be an influencer, she could still go do parties, she could still have her same like pretty much job. Like they just made it sound like she's just a spoiled brat rather than it's like that's her job. Where even then they said that there was a $500 cover charge for the party that was thrown in her honor, and he was like, wow, people would pay $500 to go see her. It's like, yeah, this is her job. She's an influencer. Like, that is a job, and she makes money. It's not just, she's not just spoiled. I mean, she is spoiled, but that's also her job. And they didn't ever really say that. And so it was very much like, is she gonna be a spoiled brat who relies on her stepdad? Or is she gonna be a fisherman's wife? Whatever. Next point. Brendan's explanation of his first marriage made him less likable, period. He had been married to somebody and she saw that he had a wedding ring in the very beginning, but she had died 7 years ago, and Brendan was very like routines. So he kept his wedding ring and was like very respectful of her memory, and he was still really close with her father, and we didn't really know what happened, but we knew that she died, and they had a memorial for her, like one of their yearly memorials for her. During this book, and his explanation of her made me like hate him. Like, it was horrible. Pretty much he said that they had been friends because he, like, her dad was like a father figure to him, and then it was like just kind of the natural next step that they got married, and then she died when he was out on one of his fishing trips. And then he's just been like respecting her memory this whole time. But then there's so many things that he says later to Piper that just are so disrespectful. He always tells her like, I've never felt like this, I've never had anyone like this, you're the best I've ever had, I've never, like, he goes on and on with saying stuff like that. It's like, okay, you suck. Why did you marry her in the first place? That like makes you less of a likable character. It makes you seem less genuine. I mean, I wouldn't want to marry someone who disrespected his, like, who had a good marriage, and then his wife died, and then now he's telling me all this stuff, like, that's disrespectful to her. Like, I would like to be respectful to her. Brendan says that he would have been happy that after he finds out that she was inviting her why do I keep saying granddad? Her stepdad, and that she was like, there was this party that was being thrown in her honor. After he finds out those things, he gets really upset, and he's like, doesn't want her to have, he's like, why do you have these like safety nets or these like backup plans or whatever? And she like doesn't really have an answer for him. And then he leaves all of a sudden, and she's like, well, it was a little bit more than that. He was like, just go back to your life. And she was like, no, I like it here and I like you. And he was like, whatever. And then he leaves. And then he comes back and he finds out that she left to go to LA. And he's like, why did I even get upset that she had safety nets? Like, I should want my significant other to like not go all in and like take care of themselves via having safety nets. It's like, okay, that's not how you acted though. That was very childish and immature, and you didn't give her a chance, and then like you expected to come back and she would be there, and then she wasn't, and you were like, Let me think about it. That was dumb. And also him saying at the very end, he was like, I'll move to LA, I'll make it work. Yeah, right. Like, hell you will, Mr. I am Westport. I mean, he didn't say that. Everybody else was like, Brandon is Westport. Not only is that his whole livelihood, it's all he's ever known, it's all that makes him happy, it's his whole thing. Why would he ever move to LA just for her? He would have nothing to do, he would hate it, and then he would end up resenting her. And that's just not a realistic, like, thing to even offer. He should have said, like, no, I'm happy with you coming back to LA and going to parties and being yourself and going shopping and hanging out with your friends and having brand deals. He should have said that, because that would actually make sense. Like I said, she can go to LA whenever he's on his boat trips for weeks, and there would be no change to their personality, to their relationship. Also, they just did not seem to have enough personality apart from their original lifestyles, like her partying and him fishing, to like realistically make sense for them to, one of them to completely change. They shouldn't have asked the other person to completely change, and they shouldn't have expected the other person to completely change. And they also should know themselves well enough to know that they can't completely change, and they shouldn't have to. So I thought that was dumb. So another thing is that a lot of people take issue with Brandon's possessiveness and his like possessive language that he uses, which is really common in a lot of romance books, and especially Tessa Bailey books. They have a lot of possessive language, and they have a lot of, I mean, there's no way to really put it besides sexist language, like a lot of male, man, big, masculine, and a lot of like feminine, soft, blah, 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 which in general is like fine, totally fine, but the way that she writes it is like not the best and not my fave. In this instance, in this book, I didn't mind the possessive language. It's just it's just preference. Some people don't like it, some people do. I mean, in my eyes, it's kind of like jealousy. Like a little bit of jealousy to me is fine. A lot is bad, obviously, but I thought that it was okay. The sex scenes, some of the sex scenes were just awkward. Okay, Tessa Bailey's like expertise is dirty talk, and that's fine, except that sometimes it's really bad, especially when it's like their first time that they've slept together. It just is really unrealistic that they have like zero inhibitions the first time they sleep together. And the scene where he was taking pictures of her on the boat, I was dead. I was literally dying. All I could imagine, because you know he like had never acted like, I mean, when he pulled out his phone in that scene where he was like downloading Instagram, I was like, oh, he has a phone. Just to seem like the kind of guy that didn't have a phone. He didn't know how Instagram worked or like even really what it was. And so him like taking out his phone, taking pictures of her, I literally was like imagining him like this. You know how like your mom does it. So just seemed really awkward. I didn't like that. He seemed to really like the fact that she was some of her personality traits that were connected to her like LA lifestyle type of personality. Like that she was spoiled. He seemed to like that. Of course, the famous line, as we remember, I'm not gonna say the whole thing, but spoiling you makes my blank blank. I don't like insta love. How did their personalities mesh? You aren't attracted and want to rip the clothes off of every hot person that you see, like on the street, but that kind of seemed to be how it was. I'm thinking also, like, what did she like about him? Just that he was like gruff. That's not my fave. So anyway, that's all that I have to say about that book. Obviously, I ended up having a lot of thoughts about it. It was like a fun read. Like I said, it was entertaining to read it. It's just like looking back on it, it's like, well, I wouldn't really want to be in that relationship, and it also didn't really make sense. So it was not my favorite. You know, it wasn't like a 1-star read. I did give it 2 stars, probably like 2 to 3. I guess if you like other Tessa Bailey books, then you'll like this. If you like insta love, you'll like this. If you like, you know, sleeping together, then you'll like this. Otherwise, you should probably skip it.